Hello everyone and welcome back to our Utensils series. Next up on the list we have thermometers. And in front of you, you have like three different types of thermometers. So these two are both what we call candy thermometers. This is a probe thermometer, which is with a digital reading. And then you might have seen this recently if you've been checked for temperature with COVID. This is a little bit different, but this is infrared thermometer. Before starting pastry school, I had never used one of these for my recipes. I've often used like a candy thermometer or a probe one. But nowadays, I just use this one like 90% of the time for a couple of reasons. But I'll get to that in a minute. I'll just cover first the one you might be the most familiar with, and then explain why it has some limitations and why I do not recommend, or like in a some very specific applications, I can recommend this one. So the one you might be familiar with are probe thermometers. So you have this long metal probe, and sometimes you don't have the cable. Like it's just like you have a digital piece here that's very simple. And you just stick it in like a roast or something and to check the internal temperature. The thing is that in pastry, you rarely need to check the internal temperature of something, like a cream or dough or something. And more often than not, surface temperature is good enough for what you're trying to achieve. And so sticking something in like cream or dough is not very hygienic, and you have a lot of cleaning up to do. Whereas this one is just regular, it's just point and shoot, right? You point at something, it gives you the reading. This is in Celsius, you switch to Fahrenheit if you want. Super easy, convenient, fast, and clean. These are used by food safety inspectors, albeit like a much fancier version of this one. This one is about like 20 bucks on Amazon, but like you can get more advanced ones, which are much more accurate. But for our application, just get a cheap infrared thermometer. It would be super useful. And you're going to see on most of my recipes, I use this like constantly to check temperature before, after mixing dough, and so on and so forth. So what do I use the other ones? This one, I actually use mostly to check my oven temperature to make sure it's accurate. So basically, and this is why I picked this model with a braided wire cable. So I put this in front of my oven display, and then I just take this inside the wire rack, and then just to make sure that the temperature displayed on the oven is accurate. And unfortunately, more often than not, it's not. So you have to adjust your oven temperature. So it's kind of, I use this to check my oven temperature most of the time. And finally, you have what we call candy thermometers, which are more like regular thermometers. Oh, I forgot one thing. Before, one of the reasons why I don't use this as well, I forgot to mention that, is it's because the probe is metal. If you have an induction cooktop and you try to measure the temperature of something like sugar syrup or cream, the induction is going to mess up with the probe. So you can't actually use this on induction tables. You need like regular electric or gas. And so that's one of the other reasons why I don't use this for most of my cooking, because I have an induction cooktop here. All right, so now to the candy thermometers. So I have two here. One that I brought back from France, I'll get to that in a minute, and something that I bought here, which, as you can see, has both Fahrenheit and Celsius readings. But I haven't used it yet because I didn't have this one. But there are quite a few design flaws in this one, which I do not recommend. It was the most highly rated on Amazon, and I'm not really satisfied with this. So let me explain some of the problems. One, it is rather short. Like, so if I put them side by side, and I line up the scales, so this one on the right is about like a third longer, because like 80 degrees here, 80 degrees here, right? This one starts lower, but when you make sugar, you never need that lower scale, like between 100 and 180. Like you don't care about that range. What matters most is what you see the readings here, like around 120-ish. So the fact that this scale is longer, the ticks here are more spread out, and there's actually 1 tick per degree Celsius. Whereas here, you only get 1 tick every 2 degrees, which is a bummer because then measurement is not very accurate, and then readings can be a little bit messy depending on how you look. So that's one of the reasons why I prefer this. Second reason is on this one, this actually comes in 2 parts. So you have the thermometer inside and then the stainless steel housing. And the scale is directly inserted inside the thermometer. So you can push the thermometer up and down to make sure that the bottom end of the thermometer is actually submerged into whatever you're measuring. So I can push it back up and down to go very, very, very close to the bottom of the pan. And this is super useful because sometimes you make like a sugar syrup and it's very, you have maybe less than ½ an inch at the bottom of your pot, and you really need to make sure that the thermometer is submerged. Unfortunately with this one, as you can see, like there's ½ an inch, about like a ½ an inch of space, and because the scale here is on the housing and not in the thermometer, you can't really just adjust it. I mean, the only way would be to cut that off, which is not ideal. So yeah, I don't think I'll ever use this one, to be honest. And but unfortunately, this is I haven't seen this anywhere in the US, and also there's only Celsius, obviously, because it's not sold in the US. Another benefit of having the thermometer and the housing separate is that you can actually pull it out. Be very, very careful. And so you can just wash this separately and put the stainless steel housing in the dishwasher if you want, and then put it back in. That's it. So in a nutshell, as I mentioned, for all of my recipes, I use this 99% of the time. When I make sugar syrup, I use this. One of the benefit of, I forgot to mention, one of the benefit of this metal housing as opposed to this one is when you have a pot like this, it's on the stove and you're measuring something, like it's just, you can stick it in there and it stands tall. It's right in the middle of the mixture and not like awkwardly like angled or at the edge of the pan. Like it doesn't stand tall, that this one does, which is super useful, especially when you push it all the way down. And that's it. That's pretty much it. So I briefly, I just want to go back to this probe thing. I mentioned that if you have an induction cooktop, it's obviously not recommended because the induction is gonna mess up with the metal from the probe. But it's also not very good with a regular pan because, like, if you're measuring sugar or cream, and this is on a hot surface like gas, for instance, the temperature of your pan or pot is going to be much higher than the content. So if you just stick your probe in there and touch the bottom of the pan, you're going to measure the temperature of this pan, saucepan. Like, you're not measuring the temperature of your liquid or your cream. You have to lift it up a little bit. So it's kind of messy. Anyway, that's all about thermometers. Again, I'll try to find references and of the ones I bought and add a link down below if you want to order. Thank you.